Grand illusion number one is this: I have done my job if I have stood in front of my classroom and said the words I plan to say. Or, phrased another way, I have done my job once I've covered all of the material in the curriculum or the textbook. Or, phrased yet another way, I have done my job once the contents of my notes have been more or less accurately reproduced in the notes of my students. Or, phrased still another way, I have done my job if at the end of the school year I'm still alive. And welcome to return next year. Or, and please indulge me as I dare to paraphrase one final time, this time from the viewpoint of the pupil, the student has learned if his or her body was physically in the room during the lesson. That, my friends, is not just an illusion, it is a grand illusion. And it will keep you from changing the lives of kids. Because there is a huge difference between a teacher and a lecturer. You can give a lecture in an empty classroom, but you can't teach in one. You can give a lecture to students who are staring aimlessly out the window, doodling furiously on their notebooks, or sleeping soundly on their desks in a puddle of their own slobber. But you can't teach students who are not paying attention. Great teachers believe at the core of their souls that the teacher has not taught until the student has learned. Teach is a transitive verb. It is something that has to be done to someone. You can't do it in a vacuum. For example, I have a 9-year-old son named Cameron. A couple of months ago, I taught him to play chess. You say, is any good? No, he can't even remember which way the pieces go. I taught him. He just didn't learn. You see how silly that is? I have not taught my son to play chess until he can play chess. And you have not taught somebody long division or algebra or language arts just because they were in the room. They haven't been taught until they have learned. A master teacher never allows himself the luxury of evaluating his performance based on what he himself has done. Rather, he ruthlessly disciplines himself every day to evaluate his own performance based solely on one criterion: what happens in the student as a result of what the teacher has done. A great teacher will never pat herself on the back for delivering this year's lesson more eloquently than last year's, unless, of course, that improved eloquence translates into greater life change and learning on the part of the student. What I'm saying is, folks, it's all about the kids. And what is true of a classroom is true of the entire district. Every single solitary thing that you do is about the kids. Let me tell you something, folks. It is not about the union. And it's not about budgets. And it's not about facilities. And it's not about your convenience. Everything is about the kids. That's got to be what drives you every single day of your life that you come to work. Now, some of you are going to say, you don't get it. I just mow the lawns. I don't care. You have to do it because you care about the kids and you believe in the dream. My friends, you should wake up every morning with tingles running down your spine in wonder and amazement that they will let you draw a paycheck to participate in such a wonderful enterprise as transforming the lives of kids. There was once an eccentric Texas oil millionaire that decided to throw a barbecue as only a Texan can do. He invited 3,000 of his most intimate friends to join him at his ranch, and after they had fared sumptuously, he gathered them around his Olympic-sized swimming pool and pulled back the cover to reveal that it was filled with ferocious, man-eating sharks. And he called out to his guests, "Now, y'all, I have a challenge for you. To any man who will have the courage to jump in this swimming pool and swim to the other end without being eaten alive, I will give his choice of 1, half my oil wells in Texas; 2, $1 million donation made to the charity of his choice in his name; or 3, the hand of my lovely daughter Bonnie Lou in marriage." No sooner had the millionaire uttered this challenge than there was a splash at the far end of the pool. A young man was in the water swimming so fast he was leaving a wake. You could have water skied behind this kid. Seconds later, he emerged at the near end of the pool, dripping wet, out of breath, but none the worse for wear. The millionaire couldn't believe it. He swaggered over to the boy, threw his arm around his shoulder, and said, "Boy, I must admit, I didn't believe anybody would have the courage to take me up on my challenge. But I, son, am a man of my word. What do you want, boy? Do you want half of my oil wells in Texas? Do you want $1 million donation made to the charity of your choice in your name? Or do you want the hand of my lovely daughter, Bonnie Lou, in marriage?" The kid said, "I don't want any of those things." The millionaire was dumbfounded. He said, "Boy, what do you want?" The kid said, "All I want is 5 minutes alone with the guy who pushed me in the pool." Now, here is a kid that 2 minutes earlier had been a mediocre swimmer. All of a sudden, he's Michael Phelps. What made the difference? For the first time in his life, he was highly motivated. The moral of the story is this: those who swim with the sharks in this life and live to tell about it do so not so much because of their personality or their IQ or their looks or their talent, but because of the intensity of their motivation. Now, all of you are motivated by different things. Some by money, some by philanthropy, some by relationships, some by fear. But irrespective of what your particular set of motives might be, the fact remains that a key difference between survivors and shark bait in this life is the level at which a person is motivated to perform. All highly influential people are infected by what I call a magical dream. And it is each leader's ability to infect the people around them with that dream that determines in large measure how effective he or she can become. All great leaders have one. For Alexander the Great, it was to conquer the world. For the founding fathers, it was to create a free society. For Abraham Lincoln, it was to end slavery and preserve the Union. No one has said it better in the modern era than Martin Luther King Jr., who stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial 4 decades ago and declared, "I have a dream that this nation under God shall rise up and live out the true meaning of her creed, that all men are created equal." And decent people of all races followed, not just African Americans, but because they were swept up in the magic of his dream. They lived off the overflow of his passion. They took his goose pimples and put them on their own bodies until they could internalize and articulate and own the dream for themselves. Now, I've got good news for you. Your dream doesn't have to be nearly that magnificent, because you don't need 50 million people to follow you to make it come true. You just need the people around you to catch fire with your vision to make it come true. This is a very anxiety-ridden week at my house. And it's going to be filled with anxiety until 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Because tomorrow afternoon at 4, that's when the local elementary school will post my son's teacher assignment for this critical upcoming 4th grade year. And like most parents, we spend a whole lot of most of our summers hoping against hope that our little boy will be assigned to one particular teacher, because that lady's reputation precedes her. And we know that there's something about that woman that somehow she manages to take every student, spread out the ashes, find a few glowing embers, and begin to softly blow on them. And over the course of the months, to fan those embers into an inferno of a love for knowledge. But just to be candid, which I can be because I'm leaving in a couple of hours, my wife told me a couple of nights ago that all summer long she's been praying that our boy does not get assigned to one particular teacher. Even the atheists in our neighborhood go to church all summer long just to hedge their bets, because her reputation precedes her. We know that there's something about that woman. She just manages to take every kid, spread out the ashes, find a few glowing embers, and pour water all over them. Let me ask you a question. What is the primary difference between those two teachers? I believe at the core of the issue is this. It is why that teacher goes to work in the morning. It's what drives him or her. That teacher that you want your kid being taught by, let me tell you why she goes to work. She loves kids. And she believes with every fiber of her soul that she is making a difference for time and eternity. She believes in the dream of education and the power of learning to transform a kid's life for the better. Now, that other teacher, the one you don't want your kid being taught by, let me tell you why he or she goes to work. They need health insurance or a pension plan, or they've got 3 years to retirement and they're hanging on for dear life, and they don't care how many students they wipe out in the process. Great teachers, just like great employees of any school district, all of them, all of you, are driven by a passion for education. Let me ask you a question. Is there a fire burning in your belly to transform the lives of kids? Does it burn so brightly it keeps you awake nights? And when you finally fall asleep, do you find yourself dreaming about it? And when you wake up in the morning, is it one of the first thoughts on your mind? And in your free time through the day, are you scheming and dreaming about new ways to do it better, to reach more kids, to reach different kids, to reach the same kids in a different way, in a deeper way? If you don't have that type of a fire in your belly and you can't get it, you will never produce the type of kids or be the type of district that you would like to be. There was once a monk who was overseeing a church building project. He walked out to the construction site to see how progress was coming along, and while there, he saw 4 men chipping stones. He asked the first, "My son, what are you doing?" The man scowled. He said, "Father, I'm chipping stones." He turned to the second and said, "My son, what are you doing?" The man matter-of-factly said, "Father, I'm building a wall." He turned to the third and said, "My son, what are you doing?" The man smiled. He said, "Father, I'm erecting a cathedral." He walked over to the fourth and said, "My son, what are you doing?" The man's eyes lit up. His face beamed as he said, "Father, I'm advancing the kingdom of God on earth, one stone at a time." Here are 4 different men doing exactly the same job, but with a totally different passion level, and probably a different job satisfaction level and work quality level as well. Listen carefully. Is everyone with me? Every eye in the house? I am convinced that it is your solemn duty as an employee of the school system to discipline yourself each and every day to give that 4th type of an answer. How many teachers do we have in the audience? Clap your hands. Teachers, I wonder if I were to walk up to you unexpectedly 6 months from now and ask you what you were doing, how would you respond? Oh, making out one more homework assignment for the students to completely ignore. Or would you look me back in the eye and say, I'm making sure that thousands of kids from Laredo one day go to college instead of jail? One homework assignment at a time. How many bus drivers do we have in the crowd? Any bus drivers? Let me hear from you. Any bus drivers? There you are up there. I wonder if I walked up to you and said, "What are you doing?" How would you respond? Well, I'm driving this same rickety bus down the same bumpy roads I've been driving forever. Or would you say, I'm making sure that the kids of my bus stop one day live in houses instead of trailers, or worse, under bridges, and transforming the world one bus stop at a time? How many cafeteria workers do we have here? Thank you, both of you. If I walked up to you in the cafeteria and asked you what you're doing, what would you say? I'm making the same freaking green beans in the same freaking pot I've been making for 25 freaking years. And that's longer than freaking has even been a word. Or would you say, I'm making sure that the kids of this school one day end up on top instead of on drugs? They end up on a board of directors instead of on welfare. That they grow up with pride and self-esteem their whole lives instead of shame. I'm transforming the world one pot of green beans at a time. You must never allow yourself to forget why you go to work, my friends. You must go every day because you love the kids and you believe in the dream.